Please take your seat. We are about to start a special session. Madame et Monsieur, bienvenue. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome at our next special session of the 2022 ISE called Building Bridges Between the Established and Emerging Space Industry. The key word for this year ISE is Space for All. And I believe that also the industry should belong to all countries and to all should collaborate with each other. And today we have a great speakers from international organizations and also the industries to talk how to do our best in terms of developing the emerging countries and also, and vice versa, developing the innovation in already established industries. So let me start with introducing our speakers, main speakers today. First, I would like to introduce the Alison Ayres-Wochel from the UN OSA. Please. The Annalisa Donati from the EURISI. Mrs. Veronica La Regina from NanoRacks, representing the industry. Then I will move to that table, so we will have a speaker sitting at the two tables. So Mr. Jonathan Hung from the Singapore Space and Technology Limited. Mr. Matias Campos from Astral Into Space Technologies, Ecuador. Mr. Raicho Raichev from Endurosat, Bulgaria. Mr. Temidayo Oniuson from Space Africa. And last but not least, the organizers of this special session. First, Mr. Michal Brichta from the Slovak Space Office. And myself, Daniel Sagat, also from the Slovak Space Office, and I will be taking charge of the moderating this session. We have prepared a survey that will accompany us during the whole session. This survey was filled by all our speakers and will be a sort of anchoring point to kick off the main points of discussion, such as the definition of the emerging countries, the main source of the potential, the main challenges that those emerging countries are challenging, the goals for strategy that governments should apply, the tools for developing space ecosystem, and the last but not least, the collaboration opportunities where they should be. Let me tell a few words about the organization of today's session. So we will start with introductory pitches of each speaker presenting their organization, especially what does their organization is doing in terms of helping bridging the emerging ecosystem with already established. And we will give a lot of opportunities for you to talk. So please bear in mind that after each round of the survey, we will, showing the survey results, we'll give you an opportunity to make some comments. So rather questions, you can think of the commenting the results that you will see after the, from the survey. Please limit your answers to maximum 1 minute because we have something more than 1 hour and there is a lot of to discuss. So ladies and gentlemen, now I would like to open discussion with the introductory pitches from our speakers. So let me start with Alison from the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs. The word is yours.
Hi, thank you very much. Good morning. So I'm from UNOOSA, United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs. Can everyone raise their hand if you know what UNOOSA is? Okay, so about half. So the UN Office of Outer Space Affairs was an office that was created in 1958 to support the development or the establishment of the Committee for the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. And I'm sure you know COPUOS. It's responsible for helping to develop the 5 outer space treaties and all the treaties supporting, including rescue and return of astronauts, the register of objects launched into outer space, etc. what most people don't know is that we have two mandates. One is the COPUOS Secretariat, and then we are a secretariat for a number of other organizations and entities, but we also have a capacity building mandate. And with that, we do partnerships, and we partner with industry. That's something we want to grow. And I'm actually here in listening mode too, because I really want to hear from you, your ideas about how we can do that better and do more of it. For the moment, we have 4 industry partnerships. We have 13 with government. We have 64 with universities. We have 81 MOUs. So it's something that we take very seriously. As you know, the 17th UN Sustainable Development Goal is partnerships. And we want to live that. We want to grow it. We really want UNUSA to be part of Space 2.0 and be relevant for emerging spacefaring nations. I really urge you to go to our booth, A26. Sorry, this is my ending pitch, but I'm going to say it early. I'm going to say it at the end, too. Booth A26, and please check us out on the web and our Facebook page and Twitter, because we have all of our projects. We just launched it today with very easy to understand examples of what we're doing. And again, I really want to hear your suggestions about what we can do better in terms of engaging with industry.
Okay, so hello, good morning everybody, and thank you again to the Slovakia Space Office for organizing this session today. My name is Annalisa Donati, and as you heard, I'm the Secretary General of EURISI. EURISI is actually like an association of a space agency. We gathered at the moment 21 space agencies across Europe and also beyond, because we have a European, let's say, born base of countries, but we look way forward, and it's not necessarily European. So we include, for instance, Morocco and the Turkish Space Agency on top of the European Space Agency and the major space agencies across Europe. And what we do can be encapsulated basically in 3 main pillars, one being the awareness raising campaign. So what we do, we work on the satellite application and the benefit for society. So our motto is bridging the gap between space and society. And with this, we do awareness raising campaigns with our members, but also collectively. So we try to gather the priorities of the different space agencies that are part of our network. We translated it into action lines for this kind of campaign. We do work a lot on user need analysis, so we really go next to the users. We try to understand which are the challenges in the uptake of satellite-based application and what can be done indeed to overcome those challenges. So we act somehow as a matchmaker between service providers, final users, but also we do work on the acceleration of the use of space. And eventually the last pillar is about the feedback. So it's we bring back to the space agencies the feedback from the users, from the service providers. So what can be done in terms of policy development to smooth the path of the uptake of those applications. When it comes to emerging space nations, so what we do is that we provide to emerging countries, but also to established countries, the possibility to interact, the possibility to have a platform where to exchange not only ideas and programs and projects, but also really best practices in terms of governance development, in terms of boosting of startup ecosystem. So it's really what we're doing is building a community, and we want this community to be freely exposed to one another way of doing space. So here we are at ESA booth, because ESA is our funding member and funding father, so we are hosted by them, and I would welcome everybody. We have some publication for maritime topic. We work a lot on different domains, so come join us and we will welcome you and talk about how to accelerate the use of space. Thank you.
Okay, good morning. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Michael, to invite me to this panel. Really exciting. So I am leading NanoRacks Europe, and here in the audience we have also the NanoRacks CEO, Amela Wilson. So please approach her during the networking. I think the question I would like to address is not who knows about NanoRack, but who doesn't know about NanoRacks. Please raise your hand. So I need to understand if I have to do a big job. You don't know. Okay. If you don't know, raise your hand. No one raised the hand. So I don't take too much time. We have been established as a brand more than 10 years ago, and we find actually that we have a role as a catalyst to unlock the access to space for everyone. So we go a little bit more beyond the motto of this IAC, that is space for all. It's actually for everyone, giving a path for everyone. Every single each of you can have a path to go up to space. And to give you some demonstration, beside that everyone knows about who is Nanoracks, we end up to give the opportunity to company who wants to prove their technology for the first time in space. So here in the panelist member, we have Endurosat with Rachel that they send up the CubeSat, their first CubeSat up to space through Nanoracks. So we end up to work with the one, I mean, they are trying to access and participate space for the first one. So saying that, I leave the floor to the other. Thank you.
Hello everyone, once again. It's great to see so packed hall today here. Thank you, first of all, to IAF partners and CNES for organizing this IAC. We're happy that we could hold this special session here today. I got inspired by my predecessing speaker, so I will ask a question. Who has heard before about Slovak Space Office? Not that many hands, but yes, it's good. We like it, and we'll be getting this better. So this is not our first event that we are organizing on the topic of emerging space ecosystem and emerging space countries. Along with our national flagship event, Emerging Space, that we organize biannually now, we already brought this topic to several interesting platforms, including United Nations COPUOS, including World Expo in Dubai last year, and now the IAC. And the reason why we are trying to have this topic to be talked more about is two particular. One is that we find this very important when it comes to democratization of space and helping to utilize the full potential of the space community globally, which can be only achieved if we can really include all regions, if we can include larger and also smaller countries, etc. And secondly, we are also going through this process basically right now. Even though Slovakia is not new to space, we've had R&D experience dating back to 1970s, already working on scientific payloads. But only now, recent years, we are beginning to work on systematically work on developing of this space ecosystem. So we like to share with others what we have learned on this path, and we also like to learn from others how to do it even better. So Slovak Space Office, just a few of you heard about it, that's perfectly fine. We've been just founded in May last year, so that's still just a short time, and we'll be doing our best that when we organize this session next year, there will be all the hands in the room going up. So we are working about 1 year now, but the SARIO, our parent organization, a governmental organization under Ministry of Economy, has been working in space since 2019. And there has been a truly interesting journey since then, because we managed over this time to consolidate and grow significantly the space ecosystem in Slovakia, establish the Slovak Space Office with a range of interesting tools to support the sector development and international collaboration, including as a very important part the bridging with the more experienced ones and with larger ones in Europe and outside. And also bringing Slovakia to the associate membership in the European Space Agency, which is right now happening this year, and we are truly excited about it. So today, bridging is a really crucial part of our work. Thank you, and I'm looking really forward to the thoughts from all of you.
Hi everybody, thank you again for having me here. Jonathan from the Singapore Space and Technology Limited, the Singapore acronym SSTL, not the UK one to be confused. So we help to coordinate and support a lot of Singapore's space activities. We don't have a national space agency in Singapore, not yet at least, but we work together with many agencies to support, coordinate all elements of space activities in Singapore, and to some degree as well to the larger and wider ASEAN and Southeast Asia region. Yeah, so we cover a lot of industry development engagements. We're actually born as a trade association, trade federation, if I may. We are restructured, and now in a way we are a group of companies that oversees different elements. So under our portfolio, we have about 120 or so corporate partners and members. 20% are local, 80% comes from quite a wide range. I know some of you here are, and including the wider range of international OEMs and partners. We also work with young companies. We run the National Space Accelerator in Singapore, where we have a portfolio of about 40 or so startups. Again, about 40% are local and 60% are locally based foreign companies and startups, and others that have also joined the program and onboarded, a lot of them, of course, over the pandemic where they could not set up overseas operations. So in a way, we help to accelerate them, sketch to scale, to capitalize them, get them market access, not just in Singapore for programs, and development efforts, but also access to the wider opportunities in space for the wider Asia-Pacific region. And when I specifically highlight space, space for space, in Asia, the context is very terrestrial looking. We have a lot of data exploitation companies. We have, of course, advanced manufacturing players, certain launch companies here and there. But a lot of it is also on the data exploitation for vertical industries that are using and utilizing space data. Yeah, so in that respect, it's Earth observation, GNSS, communications, and the whole gambit. Yeah, so anything that I think has a commercial opportunity for satellite data, that's where I think Singapore goes after to ensure that there's sufficient commercial ROI for our younger companies to sustain themselves, especially over the next couple of years. Yeah. The last piece is we do a lot of technology scouting, horizon scanning for organizations and also industry partners within not only Singapore, but again the region, or also for partners that are looking to leverage on the wider Asia-Pacific market through Singapore. Right? So this is another element that we also focus on. The last piece is we run thought leadership platforms in Singapore as well for the world. Every February, and I know some of you are in attendance, the Global Space and Technology Convention is held in Singapore, the 1,200-man show. We've been running that since 2008. Platform is open internationally for thought leaders, for companies, pitch sessions, basically end-to-end for the global space community. So we do our very best to support the international partnerships, collaborations within Singapore, and of course between Singapore and our wider international partners. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Matias Campos. I'm from Astralinto Space Technologies in Ecuador. I want to thank the Slovak Space Office for organizing this forum, which I'm delighted to be part of because Astralinto Space Technologies is all about building bridges. So Astralinto was designed to show people, especially in Latin America, that everything is possible, even space, and change that mindset for our young generations. So what we do is space logistics and ground segment operations from latitude 0. I know some companies in these forums claim they are close to the equator. We're at the equator. And well, I could tell you more about Astralinto Space Technologies, but I'm delighted to share that we will be pitching at the final for the startup competition on Tuesday at the NO2. So if you want to hear more, you're welcome to come. But today I want to focus more about what we're doing as Astralinto in advocacy platforms like the IAF to promote and build more bridges. Okay? So recently, I'm also a member of the Sideralis Foundation, which is an Ecuadorian foundation in charge of talking about space in our regions. At Sideralis, we hosted the GLEC, the Global Conference on Emerging Countries for Space, and I see a lot of people in the crowd that attended the event, so thank you for being here and also for continuing those conversations we started in Quito earlier this year on how to get more involvement of space emerging countries with industry. So I'm happy to share that a lot of, after GLEC, a lot of traction got generated, a lot of contacts, a lot of networking happened. Okay, so for example, here with Veronica here, some Latin American companies in Guatemala, in Costa Rica have recently signed an MOA to do some collaboration with NanoRacks. Myself, Astralinto Space Technologies, signed a commercial agreement with the Orbit to represent them in Latin America. So here we see that activities like this one, activities like this forum, activities like the GLEC that the IAF promotes, in fact, build bridges, okay? And it's up to us to keep these bridges up, keep building them, and getting the region into space. So without further ado, I want to thank you all for being here, and I'm happy to be at the conversation.
Hello everyone, my name is Raicho. I'm founder and CEO of Endurosat. Our story is a bit interesting because we actually created from nothing, the entire new space economy in Bulgaria. We're from a country that still has no space agency, and we bootstrapped our satellite technology and operations. Nowadays, Endurosat is one of the world leaders in nanosatellite manufacturing operations in orbit, and we do even very complex missions. We proudly serve more than 150 customers around the planet. The biggest innovation that we have done is that we designed our satellites to be software-defined, technically flying server in orbit, capable of delivering any type of sensor without the customer having to modify the satellite hardware, something very unique for otherwise very hardware-centric technology sector. And this meant that our satellites could execute any type of mission without us having to modify the platforms. Interestingly, when we started 7 years ago, the company, there was no space education in the country. So we started by aligning ourselves and collaborating with one of the best universities in the region, created our own educational program, again bootstrapping it, and all the co-founders of the company came from our own educational program. And today more than 50% of our staff, already more than 110 people, are also coming from this. I'm really here to share our experience because we actually created from zero a vibrant space program competing on world level, one of the leaders on the planet. And I firmly believe that this model could be replicated in every other emerging leader or emerging country. And it's not necessarily to start with a huge budget and huge ambitions, but actually to build firm foot on the ground by education and by leapfrogging what already exists on the market. So looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Temida. I'm the Managing Director for Space in Africa. We are an analytics and consulting company focusing on the African space and satellites industry. We're based in Lagos, Nigeria, and we mostly do work with national space agencies and government institutions to develop policies and strategies around the national space program and also implement specific space-related projects. Just last year, for example, we led baseline studies for the implementation and operationalization of the African Space Agency for the African Union Commission. In addition to this, we do a lot of work with commercial companies within and outside of Africa to explore business opportunities within the ecosystem. We've done several works with clients in the US, in Europe, and in Asia to explore different levels of opportunities in different segments of the African space and satellites industry. And today I look forward to an interesting conversation here about bridging the gap between emerging space countries and the established ones. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our speakers for introducing what are they doing in terms of building bridges between the industries. So now I'm opening the main part of our discussion and we are going to get to the survey. So let me start with the first batch of questions. Definition. What is the emerging space country? And in some aspects, what is the emerging space industry? There was a multiple choice and we ask, for example, dynamic developing space governance, dynamic space eco-growth, early stage of space sector, limited budget, limited space sector size. So based on the survey between our speakers, the biggest consensus is defined by early stage of space sector development. And the last one represents the dynamics of developing the space governance, so the institutionalization, which seems very interesting point for discussion. So at the one side, early stage, and the second side, less of the dynamic of the space government. So I would start with a round of each speaker, and please make your comments on the survey results. You can also point what was your choice here.
I think mine was definitely actually at the smallest one, dynamic development and space governance, because we have a big space law program and we have a huge amount of demand for this from countries that say they understand that to drive investment and investor confidence, they need a space legislation and regulation. We don't tell them what to do, we just provide different models. But for me, developing the infrastructure, your legislative infrastructure, brings the investment and provides a commitment from the government, a political commitment to move forward. So for me, that's actually quite important.
Thank you. So I also, like, one of my answers was the early stage of the development, because this is, I guess, it's what brings together the different emerging countries that can be taken into account. Eventually, I think that several different institutions have been trying to define what an emerging country is. I guess that there's plenty of different factors that needs to be taken into account. One of those can be indeed governance and the development of governance models. So the Space Agency can be one of those, but in general terms, I mean, it also depends on the support that you can get from the government and from the public institutions in terms of funding, but also in terms of structuring the space program themselves. And then the limited space sector size can also be like one of the elements taken into consideration, trying to understand whether this limit comes from the capacity, for instance, technological capacity or the political capacity. So there again, there needs to be seen, and the engagement of the industry with the different stakeholders.
Yeah, so when I saw the question, actually, I was thinking every one of these questions is an element of defining the emerging space country. So I would like to choose the one a little bit out of the box, like the nature of NanoRack, that was a pathfinder, an initiator, a pioneer to unlock the venue to space. So basically, my answer was the dynamic space sector growth, in a way that from one side, you know, there is maybe less attractiveness to go to the emerging space country because they have a limited budget and they have a limited size of the space sector, even though for an actor as a NanoRack, it's interesting to engage them to move forward, to have more opportunity, to enabling them to have a more dynamic space growth. Thank you.
I completely agree with Veronica on this. Definitely early stage of space sector development is one of the key defining factors, but I would say that similarly important is exactly the dynamic space sector growth, because if an ecosystem or a country has a small space sector and it doesn't grow and there is no dynamics, then we wouldn't probably call it emerging space country. It would be basically non-space country mostly. And really the reason why country starts doing these kind of activities or the result of these kind of activities aimed at become a spacefaring nation can be, in my view, defined by that the things are moving forward and there is a growth of interest among the companies. There is a push, let's say, to find either private or public investments into the sector, and all these together enable that the number of companies grow or the research institutions are getting involved.
Thank you. I agree with my colleagues. I'm pretty sure I was early stage of space sector development. I think that is a primary characteristic of emerging space countries. But if I guess we are all in that bucket, to me, I guess that's the good news, because everything else can evolve, and that's where, as you change that dynamics of being early stage to growth stage, everything else will fall into place. In Singapore's case, we don't have much of a space hinterland. We have to find ways to extract space into other commercially or translatable means, right? So that our companies and government organizations can see the value of utilizing space and space data specifically. So we have worked very hard actually to convince, I guess, our partners, organizations, government agencies to see the value. And I think satellite, space for space, cannot be just our way, it's space for everything else. And that's why we work very hard to find many adjacent industries to bring into our fold, right, to leverage and that force multiplier of satellite data into other fields, right? With that, then you move from, I guess, emergent to growth and beyond, yeah?
Thank you. On my side, I want to comment. I'm the vice chair of the administrative committee for emerging countries here at the IAF, and this is we fight about this a lot, how to define the emerging countries. Because, for example, of course, you would assume that the developing countries are emerging countries, but there are some developed countries that are also emerging space countries. A quick example could be Australia. Australia has the space agency is almost 3 years old, I think, maybe 4. But they are members of the committee, and it's very interesting to see the dynamic within the committee because it's very different to, like in my case, to develop the Ecuadorian space sector versus developing the Australian space sector. But still there are some synergies, and having conversations like this help us to grow together, to see, for example, European companies or American companies feel more comfortable working with Australians than with the Latin Americans, but trying to see how that works and also sharing those thoughts with the other emerging space countries is the way to go. And I really like this answer because you see that it's a little bit of everything, and it really depends on case by case from which country. Because in some countries you have money, but you don't have a regulation. In others you have regulation support, but you don't have money. And it's about doing that mix and match and trying to see what's the best roadmap for the given country.
In my opinion, as an entrepreneur, I bet on the entrepreneurs to build each developing country or emerging leader country in space programs. I don't really believe you start with regulating something that does not exist. And on top of that, as an entrepreneur, I think that the best possible thing for a government, especially in a new sector that does not know what to do, is to not regulate it, but to leave the open market to self-regulate itself. I really believe that the future of emerging countries and those who really find a way to incentivize entrepreneurs to go into new sectors will be the winners, and those who start with trying to formally create enormous amount of energy and put all their energy in administration or work agencies, different fundings are not going to be as successful. This is my opinion.
Thank you very much. I agree with what most of the speakers have said. I think there are several factors that define what an emerging space country is, and even if we look at the trajectory of the industry in the last couple of decades, we'll see that a lot of things have changed. For example, before government see it as their responsibilities to develop space capabilities and set up an agency to manage all of these, but we're also seeing a shift, to the private sector, whereby governments can just empower the private sector to build these capabilities, and they can build sovereignty out of that. So there's a lot of factors that play a key role in this. And what Rachel said about the regulations, and I think it's still important for any government that is serious with building a space program to create a governing structure that would create the sort of environment where entrepreneurship can actually thrive. So, because if you just leave that out, things may not happen. But when you create intentional policies that would attract, for example, foreign companies, or that would put investors' mind at peace, then you'll be able to create an ecosystem out of that.
Thank you very much. So now it's time for the audience. And I have a question for all of you. Please raise your hand if you consider you're coming from emerging space country. Okay, so it seems almost like 50-50, which is very good. So is there anyone in the audience like to make a comment on this particular survey question? Please, go ahead. Introduce yourself, please.
Good morning. My name is Pilar Zamora from Colombian Space Agency. And about a limited budget, I think that there is not true that we have an unlimited budget. I think that the problem is that in our organizations, governments, country, the citizens don't know or don't have so knowledge about what they can do with the space technology, with the information. And in that sense, for example, in Colombia, we lose so money, so governmental, so money in the industry, in our different economies, spend it because we don't know, for example, that the Earth observation exists. No, in some places we think that we need go in person to some places to see, for example, the agriculture, to see other process. So I think that if we really cooperate in education programs, in share really what we can do with the space technology, that the space is for our Earth. Space is, yes, it's for space too, but if you share the applications that we can really build and give social solutions, I think that we can have this risk about the limited budget.
Thank you very much. It was a very interesting comment. Very quickly.
Yes, thank you. Just I wanted to add something on top of what has been said by saying that for sure the economic part, the indeed lively, for instance, and very active industrial segment, it's key. But at the same time, without a governance that can indeed bring together all what we've been saying, so the development of the program, all the resources, and use that in an effective way to communicate, but also like to manage the funding opportunities, to the partnership development. This is also key, and that's why in the definition of the emerging country, the consideration of the governance is always like a key point, let's say, that to understand the maturity also of the country itself. Just.
Thank you. So now let's turn to another question. The potential. Where do you see the main source of potential for further space sector development grow in emerging country? So we have new companies and startups and technology transfer in between academia and business collaboration as the very significant elements for increasing the potential. So I will ask for a very quick round, and we'll start from that side now.
Thank you very much. I think that when we also define emerging countries, we often define that in the context of the established countries. So, for example, we look at the US, where it's, they've got a lot of things figured out, and then we look at other countries with respect to that, like, okay, this is the model of how an established space nation should be, but I don't think that should be the case because governments have different priorities. So some countries don't want to do exploration, for example. For some countries, it's just about space application. But if they don't do exploration, it doesn't mean that they are less of an established space nation. And I think that this is very critical. And talking about what should be the potential for further space sector development for emerging countries, I think this is also based on individual countries because different governments have different priorities. And for some, it's about the economies of the industry. For others, it's about the research and development. So I think all of these factors play a key role, but this is a question for the government to decide what the priorities should be.
Again, I think the priority should be on the entrepreneurs because those are the people building every single part of the economy sectors that we live today. And I think the government roles in the development world, governments and new space commerce should be just to understand what are the biggest hurdles of the entrepreneurs, how they can excel more and nothing else at the early stages at least of development. Today we are helping quite a few nations to start off their programs the same way. Most of them struggled at the beginning going to really established space players. They sold them very expensive technology. They had zero learning curve in the process, and this was a governmentally run program. So I imagine you have two choices. Buy a satellite that you don't actually need for 100 million as a small nation dreaming about space with zero results, literally objectively zero results, or spending 100 million in risk investments in your own ecosystem to teach the entrepreneurs how they can join space sector. So this is, I totally aim for the new space startups and companies, and I hope that more emerging countries are optimistic about these decisions.
Thank you, Reiko. Following up on that, and representing the Latin American and Caribbean group here in the Federation, I'm happy to share that the startups and new space companies from the region are leading the way, of course. traditional space for us was not a possibility. Our government's having other priorities with education and healthcare. But now that the space is being privatized, companies from Mexico down to Argentina are bringing space to the region. And it's not like we go and say, oh, please come to our countries and do things for us, like put some antennas or come and sell us a satellite, as Raiko was saying, and then we don't know how to operate it, and the government just doesn't have the infrastructure in place to handle it, but rather work together with us. For example, Mexican Dirium Labs works together with Airbus, hand to hand. It's not a position of developed countries, developed companies are superior. It's more like, hey, let's work together. There's an interest of us of learning from you, but there's interest of you in the region. So let's work together. As I was mentioning in Central America with the microgravity experiments, and also space logistics ground segment in the middle, and a success case is Satellogic also in Argentina. So you see how the region is progressing through space startups in the new space era.
Thank you. So I think all these pieces are very important. By definition, if you are an emerging space country, you probably have a lot of challenges. Budget, governance, and so on and so forth. So in my view, I think the first area that one should consider is the economic impact of the space industry to your own country. Right? I fully agree with my colleagues here. There's no point either trying to compete with the big players. You're not in the same space, never will be, right? And again, it is very different in your geographic or environmental requirements, right? So I think you have to suit your own and identify what your local industries and requirements actually are. And then that's where you start to pick and choose and, of course, pivot whatever you're looking at to develop. Even the young companies and startups in a particular country need to align with those areas, because if you can demonstrate that there's an economic or return, right, to the government, to the country, to your other commercial partners, the rest of the support would naturally come. If there's no impact, and I guess we see this in our accelerator, right? A lot of companies, they come out with the best technology, every startup, the best in the world, right? But if there's no end objective in mind, right, or you have just built technology for something which you don't know, like the $100 million satellite example, right, then you are finished, right? Then you're doomed from day one, right? So I think one of the key things here that I wanted to highlight, I'm pretty sure I also selected it, was spinning in the non-traditional industries into the space sector. I'll give you an example. We don't do space for space. If we want to manufacture satellites, for example, yes, we do need qualification, high quality, and of course, clear OEM capabilities to help you with the AIT test facilities and some of the ruggedization of the satellites. But the general broad-based satellite can be built by EMS companies, right? And many countries, emergent, growth, and established countries all have a domestic base load of electronics field. Right? So Singapore has an electronics industry. We don't have space companies when we started out 20 years ago, but we have electronics companies. Can we teach those guys to go into space? Actually, it was the other way around. They taught us how to do it because these guys built, they can spit out mobile phones at 1 million a line, They don't need our help, right? They may need help to go to space, maybe, but they can do this low cost, right? And they control a large, dashboard of supply chain in electronics components anyway, right? If you buy it from somebody else at a tier 1 OEM, you pay a premium. You buy it from a Jabil or Flextronics or somebody else, you get half the price, right? So, and these guys are based everywhere around the world with, 100 sites. Their geographical footprint is wide. You can leverage on these guys to leapfrog, and build a space case, right, for the country. So that, I think, is something very critical when you look at what's important for an emergent space country.
Excellent points. My colleagues on the left, there is very little to add. I really liked what said Temida in the very beginning. There is no generalization here. Each country has its specifics. And it's very important, therefore, so that the country tries to do an assessment in the beginning of the sector development process to find and to see where the potential actually lies. We did this in the very beginning in 2019, where we started the ecosystem development, and we found out that there are basically 3 pillars. They are all here. We did the survey, so of course they're here. And that's the new companies and startups, which is an obvious choice for most of the people when they've been asked. The technology transfer, as I mentioned, the academic heritage in our case was 50 years old, so there is a lot of potential there. But very important, what also now Jonathan underlined, is the spinning in. And this was actually the very first that we tackled, because we understood that First of all, you can use what's already invented, you can use what's already developed for terrestrial use, and it might even have very strong competitive edge on regional or even global scale. And it's very pity to simply leave it there and not to try to bring it to the space sector, as for example electronics, as for example mechatronical components or software. So we started approaching these technological companies in these relevant areas, and this was actually the first incoming ones, and the way how we managed to do the first growth in the first years. And this was also growth which was quite sustainable, because compared to startups, which can have certain death rate problem, if you bring a company which is well based in terrestrial sector, they tend to be a bit more stable. So if one project doesn't go well, it's not always the case that they have to fold and they have to leave the game. They might try it again and again. So this is also a way how to try to make the very beginning and the very base of the sector stable and well-based.
Okay, so looking at the question, my answer was technology transfer, academia, business collaboration. Basically, as a NanoRack, we start actually with just providing the servicing to the startup. So it was an element to find a startup in emerging country. And then we understood that basically to increase the alliance, we should go beyond just serving them their needs. So it's very important for our business model to locally find a partner that we transfer the technology in order to enlarge the overall potential of the local area where the partner is located. Thank you.
So, I have to say that I agree with all the predecessors in saying that all those points are actually describing the potential and can enhance the potential of emerging space countries. For sure, what I want to say is that cross-fertilization and the spinning in, it's very, very important in order to make sure that what is already existing indeed can be brought into the space field, and that can be let's say, again, improved by what space data can contribute. The collaboration, it's very, very important, because only through synergies, we can actually, once again, enhance the potential of the countries. So I would say that indeed this is, it was my answer and what I believe that can really, really make the difference in emerging countries.
I would say technology transfer in academia and business, and I want to give you an example. One of the things that most countries say to us is they need access. They don't need funding so much. They need access to data, access to platforms. One thing we have is we just did a project where Thailand submitted a proposal for a water meal. It's a plant that's very hardy, and it's going to be the first plant that's ever tested in a full life cycle of a plant. And it's something that could be eventually the basis of long-term spaceflight nutrition. And they need access that's going to fly up on the space station. And again, this is coming from Thailand. It's not coming from NASA. It's not coming from ESA. So I think technology transfer and access to platforms is what really will drive this development. Also because that could create an ecosystem in Thailand around space-based nutrition and space-based botany, et cetera. So that's something we're really banking on.
Thank you very much. The time flies very fast, and therefore I'm switching to the fast mode, and I give the opportunity to someone from the audience to make a comment. Yes, please, lady over there.
Hi everyone, I'm Sindhu from India. I'm actually working with a few more young professionals for Asia Pacific Sustainable Space Community Development, and we have been researching about ASEAN countries and a few more Asia Pacific countries for the past 1.5 years. And I have a couple of comments for the first and the second. For the first, we also observed that the emerging countries have been working on developing the new space sector in parallel with their national space agencies. So I agree with her on space governance being an important key feature for defining the emerging space country. And for this one, technology transfer, there is also academia collaborations that we have observed quite extensively in the Asia Pacific region. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we turn to another one. Challenges. What do you see the main challenges emerging space ecosystem is facing on its way to growth? lack of political interest. So I'll give the chance to talk to political institutions. United Nations, you have an award.
Yeah, this is something that actually we've been hearing a lot about. A lot of spacefaring nations, emerging nations, they all tell us we don't need the funding, right? It's exactly what you said. We need the political support. So they come to us because the United Nations, as a neutral arbiter, gives kind of an imprimatur of the importance and the gravitas of the importance of the space sector. So they need us to partner with them to convince their own political class to invest in space. And so we see that increasingly as an important function for us.
I agree totally on this point.
And I choose another speaker from this side, Astra Lindu.
Okay, thank you. Yes, as you see, there's a lot of challenges, and that summarizes my life as an emerging countries entrepreneur in a way. But yeah, the government is, for example, in Ecuador, after the GLEC is when the government really saw there's potential here. Okay, they saw that all the heads of agencies that were there, all the CEOs and high-rank people from the space industry that were there, and they were there because they had interest in working with us. And then the government said, like, okay, let's do it. And now they're supporting us. And yeah, it's once you have that, the other things start flowing, but still challenging.
Anyone from the speakers would like to make a specific comment on that? No? Audience? The first one was lady behind there. A short one, please.
I think a lot of the factors that we mentioned here, these are problems because we failed to address a few points in the previous slide, which is the soft factors of how to develop a space sector. And this could focus on the ease of doing business, and it doesn't matter with which stakeholder it is. The government or the regulators, they do not speak the same language as the industry. And often these bridges are harder to build than most others. So I think there should be a stronger focus on the softer aspects where rules, regulations, policies, or whatever are made more accessible to the different parties in the ecosystem so that we can fix some of these things listed here.
Excellent. Someone else from the audience? There is a one. Yeah, I'm running towards. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Madin. I'm from the Maldives, and I'm from the Maldives Space Research Organization. We're very young. We're actually just a few months old now. And there's a very clear, one of the biggest issues we have is the lack of public interest, but I would say it's more about public awareness. And I think it also ties into the previous slide where, yes, we need technology transfer, we need startups, but that's further down the road. We need indigenous population to actually understand what space can do for them, so that they can then themselves start to push the political interest to take action. So a lot of times what we see in the Maldives example is like space is still very foreign, like what space can do for the ocean, for example, or what space can do for the climate. This is something that we're seeing that we definitely need to address that gap of awareness. And this is not through necessarily academic collaborations, because that is also further down the road. This is really through by talking to them where they live, where they are, hosting events, for example, in the islands. And this is very specific to the Maldives, but we see quite a bit in other developing nations as well, where we don't really address the indigenous population in an area that is being targeted. We're still at the very higher level, at an academic and institutional level, and we should target the indigenous level. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So let's go to another one. Strategy. What should be emerging space countries' main goals when it comes to space ecosystem development? Increase national technological capabilities, so technology. Who from the speakers would like to make a comment on this? Michal?
So this is pretty much connected to the challenges, and we started this with identifying the challenges, which were mainly two in the case. It was the small ecosystem, limited ecosystem, which meant that there are issues with creating synergies within the ecosystem, because if you have very few dots, it's very difficult to connect them, and just a few of these dots can be connected with each other, because one is doing software for, let's say, planning missions, one is doing hardware, one is doing Earth observation applications. So you cannot connect everybody. Secondly, the challenge number 2 was little awareness in out abroad about the existing capabilities. So therefore, the strategic tools that we try to implement were first to increase the number of companies so you can create synergies more easily, and secondly, to increase the awareness so the companies which are already doing something can get in touch with their partners and they can present that they are capable of doing something. Because in space you very often have old networks and very well-built networks within existing strong companies, and it's not that easy to penetrate them often. So I think that the increased number of companies, increase the technological capabilities, and also the awareness are very important.
Thank you. Audience, anyone willing? Oh yes, I will get here. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, I am Zinzi Koenig. I'm from the Southwestern Oregon Community College in the United States, and I believe this main goal should be, and this explains much, the addresses of ecological problems, which can build confidence, binding measures, and increase the long-term sustainability of outer space activities for the peaceful purposes.
Thank you. This was a very nice comment, because indeed the ecological problems are less core than the satellite services are a lot about the ecology, right? And now we're challenging a lot of changes. So let me turn to another question, tools. What main tools, measures should emerging space countries use to further develop their space ecosystem? And we have a supportive legislation, government funding, and helping with attracting private investments. Industry partners. Endurosat.
I think absolutely the government should have a supporting role, meaning the least amount of regulation at the beginning and the maximum amount of streamlining entrepreneurs in their own community, respecting the cultural and the political and economical senses of their own communities. Attracting risk capital is super important, because risk capitals are teaching entrepreneurs how they can start from day one to think about the market realization of their technology, and potentially some collaboration between already existing, hopefully if they have, some cases they don't, good educational program in technology where they can spin into the space ecosystem some additional ideas.
Anyone else from the speakers, United Nations?
One of the things that we hear is that people say it's the technology transfer support. People will tell us again, we don't need the financing, we need in-kind contributions. Also because when you approach an entity and you say, I would like funding, everyone recoils, right? We've all been through that. But when you say, I need an expert, I need a platform, I think that's where really the connections are made. They can prove themselves, and then the funding comes. So for us, we're really focusing on providing that sort of linkage with the tools, the access, and we do workshops, we do all sorts of educational programs so that they can get the expertise and then build their program from there.
Thank you very much. Audience? Hey.
I think that we can put on the list the investment funds and the venture capital funds. I think that will be a great idea. And the other, I think that in the Latin American case, will be great to have a framework with the political and multilateral entities. For example, in Latin America, we had an Andean community. So maybe we can take the similar case from Africa, and we can copy in Latin America and create a framework for the political makers.
Thank you very much. Anybody else from the audience? Yeah, please.
Hi, my name's Austin Dimitri. I'm from Newmark Knight Frank. We're a real estate company, and my group does global consulting on attracting foreign investment and domestic investment for our clients. And so, translating that, we help economic development agencies that have sites and places for investment for, say, an EV or battery farm, new industries, emerging industries, And I'm hearing the challenges that you're facing, and I'm translating it to what I do for a living in terms of attracting investment and helping my clients attract investment. And so there are a number of terrestrial industries. I'm thinking about it from a commercial standpoint because that's what's going to attract investment. So hearing those industries, hearing these reasons here for what your challenges and your tools are very similar to what I do. And I'm interested in, beyond the sectors, which companies are you targeting as well? Who are going to be the first movers? I'm thinking about like the last huge commercial development was the internet, right? You had Netscape, AOL, no longer here, but now you've got Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Netflix, Google. Who are going to be those companies that are going to really fund the technology advancement for space exploration?
Thank you very much for your comment. And we are now going to the last question. Collaboration opportunities. Where do you see the main opportunities for collaboration involving the emerging space countries? And it is the industrial collaboration. So who would like, from the speakers, make a comment here? Androsat.
Again, we have already experience working with several emerging countries and helping them build their own capability. The question comes to the countries and the regions themselves. Do you want to be a user or a player? If you want to be a player in any industry, you have to put the strong fundamentals, the educational programs. You have, again, to leave absolutely as much as possible freedom to your own entrepreneurs to grow, and you have to have endurance. Why endurance? Because it takes at least a decade or more for you and your efforts to go further in time, and this is one of the biggest challenges in developing worlds, because the developing countries usually have very dynamically changing policies. Different governments are going away in a few months, and this might jeopardize the efforts. But you can absolutely bootstrap a leading space program. We are the proof of it. I'm really happy, and I'm pretty sure that this model could be replicated in any other environment using and respecting the local culture and specificities.
Anyone else? Yes, please.
So I want to say that if for collaboration, I think it's very important to attend these events. So if you are in an emerging country, coming to these events, getting the chance to talk to people from the industry, but also for people from established places industry. These events, before perhaps it was more of all people from established space actors, but now there's a lot of emerging countries. So if you go around, you'll see students from Costa Rica, from Guatemala, from Mexico, from Peru. Take a chance to talk to them. Also, through the ACDC, the Committee for Emerging Countries, we always have an emerging countries booth. So it's booth 828. So if you go to the exhibition hall, of course you can go NASA, Lockheed, but also take a chance to talk to the emerging space countries. You'll be surprised by the ingenuity, by the talent that these young people have from Latin America, from Africa, that are there, and they're eager to talk, to learn, to continue growing, and coming to places like this is the way to go. And in that same note, also join the committees of the IAF. For the ACDC, we have members not only from emerging countries, but from established space actors, and they join the committee to help, to collaborate, to see what's happening, and it's very valuable to have those members on the committee. And likewise with the sub-regional committees, it's great to have you. We have African, we have Asia Pacific, we have Middle East, and we have Latin American. And all of those report to the ACDC, and then the ACDC reports back to the IAF Bureau. So there's a way of getting emerging countries and collaboration through the system of the federation to get more opportunities. So you're all invited to participate from that.
I think they are quite equally important, but if the country really aims at being not just the client of space technologies, but to provide and create value in terms of space technology, then the industrial collaborations are definitely crucial. We see it on our case on how connections with larger, mainly European, large system integrators and smaller SME companies is helping the growing ecosystem and the startups and smaller, newer companies, because they don't only learn a lot from these larger partners, but they also see how they should, in which direction they should go, so they can find relevant clients in the future for their businesses.
Nanarax.
Yes.
I would like to add, to the inputs and the answer that from my previous panelists here. I think in the space sector, it's particularly important to have this sort of tango. You know, you have one step in front and double back, in a way that you need to have a front runner. That is always science, technology. So the front runner, the R&D is very, very important because creates the needs to have something. And to have something, the something comes from the implementation, from the industry. So, this type of tandem is particularly important to move forward the capability of the emerging country. Of course, the work, the space, technology, science advancement, so on, started many years ago. They would like to keep on board. Please don't make the mistake to say that you want to start reinventing the wheel. Just start now and keep the technology level is available at global level. That's why it's very important to have the opportunity to work with established company in a way that they can transfer the technology, the needs, the access, and to move on the local capability. So I have seen here in the audience a number of countries that they are emerging in the space domain. If you work with NanoRack, we will not leave you alone after just the launch and the access of the VISTA experience. We would like to grow together to enlarge participation. Thank you.
So, and the last moments belongs to you, the audience. The gentleman over there was the first. And please introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'm not from a company. I am from India, which is not an emerging space nation either. But the reason I just wanted to say something to this audience is that I had an office called InSpace, which is a newly created office in India, with the objective of promoting space in the private industry. Okay? So everything that you talked about here are issues that we are grappling with right now as to how do we enable private industry, especially young private industry, to come into space. So if any of you have an interest in exploring Indian space sector, Indian space economy, please feel free to contact InSpace. We have a global knowledge forum on Wednesday, so you can participate there also to get more information. But all this discussion is very relevant to what we are doing in India.
Thank you very much. Yes?
Thank you. So my name is Tejumala Taiwo. I'm an assistant professor of space system engineering at the International Space University. So when I'm in a meeting like this, so I have two caps. I'm from Nigeria, and I live in France. I did my grad school in Japan at QTech. QTech is the world #1 university with the highest number of CubeSat in the whole world. And I've worked on satellite projects that are in space. So this kind of discussion, I would say the most important thing that developing countries, emerging space countries should seek for is capacity development, training, education. All of these other points will come. How to fix your R&D will come if you understand what space can do for you. How to fix your industry will come if you understand how space fits into different aspects of your industry. Without this, without education, so I see many young people from developing countries in a meeting like this, and after 2 years, 3 years, many of them fizzle out. They cannot continue to fit in because they don't have the requisite education, which is very, very important. So, if you are from developing country here, if you are from emerging space nation here, the only point, the important tool is education. If you get education, you will fix all these other points. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Important comment. Yes? And then I'll be better.
I would like to thank the person that just spoke from Nigeria. I agree, education is the most important part of this development. But part of that is the last one too. Sharing the best practices of good governance in space so that we can have these relationships and investments collaborations to help build the confidence we can have in one another in space by sharing governance practices. Thank you.
Thank you, and I promise the last word, the lady over there.
Hi, thank you. So Diana De Toro from the United States. Some of the things that we've talked about, a lot of sharing education, training, some accesses that we've talked about, and we've talked about a lot about partnerships. And I'm just wondering if I could maybe talk, I guess, afterwards. The applicability of some of the relationships that we already have with some developing programs and emerging space actors is with government, yes, but particularly in the defense sector, where the militaries cooperate and learn from one another and teach one another. And so I'm interested in learning more about that, hearing about that, because I think there's some tremendous training opportunities and subject matter experts that come from that. And so I'd just offer not to forget about that portion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now this is the end of our special session. And first of all, I would like to thank you to our speakers. A small applause for them, please. Second of all, and more important for you, the audience, to coming and to discuss with us. Big applause to you as well. And please do not hesitate to come approach to any of the speakers that were present here today and continue on this important discussion about the emerging space ecosystem and how we can make space available for all. Thank you very much.